Hi, everybody. This is Maya Zahira with Psychic Protection Sanctuary, and we're now starting our free monthly class in Zoom that is for members of our free Facebook group called Psychic Protection Sanctuary. So this is a bonus, wonderful thing that we offer to the members of the free Facebook group every month. Is this free Zoom class. So if you're watching the replay and you're not a member of the free Facebook group, it is called Psychic Protection Sanctuary Facebook group. And you can find your way to the group, and that members of the group have access to the whole class. If you are watching this replay somewhere else, you might only have access to the first half of the video. So one way to get access to all of it is to join the Facebook group. There are some other ways as well that I'll explain later. So let's jump right into our topic. I'll swing back around to some announcements in a little while. So our topic is, can a child be, quote, promised to the dark forces? Or can a child be promised to the demonic forces? The demonic forces being one subset of the dark forces in general. So we're talking about, can this happen to an infant or a child of any age? Can they be promised to the dark forces? So I'm going to be breaking this down today, explaining some of the different things that can happen, some of the different ways and reasons why this sort of thing can happen. I am going to read a couple of pages from my book, the Psychic Attack Sourcebook, but I will be doing a lot more than reading. I'll be talking about some other aspects. And then we'll also have the opportunity for anyone who can relate to what I'm talking about. You'll have the opportunity to share bits of your story. And since we're on Zoom, you also have the opportunity to come on camera and share, ask questions as well. So we'll do some of that sharing a little bit later. Okay, so I just want to welcome everybody, and let's do what we frequently used to do when we had when we used to do this on Facebook Live. Those of you who are here live, go ahead and use the chat option and let us know where you're joining from. So use the chat, let us know where you're joining from, and I'll go ahead and give you a shout out. And then also, when you share where you're joining from, go ahead and share if you can personally relate to this topic. And I'll just say, even though I'm not going to share my whole personal story in this particular class, one reason why I've had interest in this topic, can a child be promised to the dark forces, is because that is something that happened to me. I actually fit into one of the categories that I'm going to describe to you today. So if this is something that you can relate to yourself, or maybe someone else in your family, you suspect that this sort of thing happened, you can go ahead and share that in the chat as well. So I'm going to put on my crazy reading glasses and my old lady reading glasses. You know, I have to laugh as I read these comments. As soon as I turned 50, all of a sudden I needed reading glasses. Okay, so we've got Catherine is saying hi all. Kathy is from Houston. Catherine from California. Saliv is from Tucson, of course. It was wonderful meeting you a while back. Catherine says, I have had so much trauma I haven't deserved and it doesn't end. So I'm thinking, yes. Mary Ellen says, hi, I'm joining from near Boston. Jamie, hanging out here in Chandler, Arizona. I can definitely relate to this topic as this has happened to my best friend's son. Kathy says, it's possible I may have been promised by my grandmother. When she died, she went down screaming and there was poltergeist activity. That is really interesting, Kathy, because my situation was connected with my grandmother as well. I was not present when she died, but the day that she died, there was a crazy amount of super weird spiritual activity. I won't go into the whole story this time, maybe another time, but that's really interesting that yours also connects with your grandmother. Okay, so before we really dive into this topic, I'm really grateful for some online conversations that we had in our Facebook group where some people were starting to talk about this subject, and it brought to my attention that I should clarify what we're talking about and what we're not talking about in today's information, in today's class. I was going to call it a class, and then I was thinking, actually, we're just spending time together and I'm sharing information. So, but it sort of is a class. So feel free to grab pen and paper so that you can remember everything. So what we're not talking about and what we are talking about. So there is something called an ancestral curse, a negative spiritual issue that runs through a family lineage. That is something that occurs. It happens to a lot of people. But that's not what we're talking about specifically in today's topic. So examples of ancestral curse could be somebody was angry at your family and they sent negative energy towards some of your family members, and they were like, I want to curse your family. And so like now you are the one living 5 generations later, and there are some maybe spiritual problems in your family or even personal problems, addictions, illnesses that originated from a curse that is now running down the family line. It could have been caused by someone actually initiating a curse, black magic of some kind, or even some kind of entity interference that's following down the family lineage. So that's definitely something that is quite common. But what we're talking about here is not quite that phenomenon of something coming down the family line to different family members. What we're talking about here is when a child, and it could be more than one child, but for the sake of simplicity, we're going to say one child, when a child is singled out and is promised to the dark forces. And I'm going to explain what that is in today's class. That is actually something that happens. So in going more deeply into that topic of can a child be promised to the dark forces, I'm going to start off by doing the reading, and then I'll do some teaching. I'm going to be reading from the Psychic Attack Sourcebook, which you can get off of Amazon. And it is the only, there are other books on psychic protection, obviously, but this is the only book that talks about what this book talks about. Like, it definitely covers different things than all the other books. Okay. So let me back up a little bit and say that what I'm going to be reading about first here is not specifically about a child being promised to the dark forces, but more about problems in the family lineage. So I'll be reading about that, but then I'm going to narrow it down and talk about this child promising thing. Okay. So, okay. So this is page 180. This is chapter 8, spiritual targeting through ancestry and soul contracts. So First, we're talking about more generally ancestral curse problems following down the ancestral line. A, quote, bad relative in your family tree can cause a chain reaction of chronic spiritual issues for all of the relatives who come after. A troublesome progenitor may have committed terrible crimes against people, animals, or the earth, misused their position of power in their community or the world, misappropriated esoteric knowledge, or practiced the dark arts, or engaged in Satanism or other malignant practices. An ancestor such as this creates a dark ripple down the family line, and this ripple effect can manifest in a whole variety of ways, impacting each relative uniquely or splattering a whole slew of bad karma, bad luck, suffering, or dark forces interference onto the whole familial crew. And one of those possible family issues can be cult participation, different family members participating in Satanism or other kinds of cults. And as an offshoot of that, then they promise their children, their ancestors, their future ancestors to the dark forces. So the next thing, a family member who is a Satanist or a cult member may willingly, so here we're getting about this children being promised. A family member who is a Satanist or a cult member may willingly or through coercion promise their child, their spouse, other relatives, or even all of their future descendants to the dark forces without the family's consent. So this person who is a Satanist or a cult member, it says that they may willingly or through coercion. So they might they might promise their descendants to this cult or to the dark forces willingly because they want to receive the extra privileges that come along with doing something like that. You know, the cult privileges, or they might be forced or pressured into promising their descendants to the cult or the dark forces. Doing so may grant that cult member certain favors and privilege within the malign religious organization. Generally speaking, this means that the family member or members may be surveilled, harassed, psychically attacked, or completely taken over by these negative forces. As you may imagine, this is not going to go well for those who were unknowingly promised to the dark forces. This corrupt, misguided family member could be currently alive, actively engaging in dark spiritual practices against their family, or this could be a recently deceased or distant relative who has stirred up negative spiritual targeting for their ancestry. Okay, and there are other, those are just two of the possible family ancestry problems. There are several listed in the book in that chapter, but those will get us started. So, all right, so just to recap a little bit, a person might choose to promise a child, hang on, somebody's asking what chapter that was. That was chapter 8, spiritual targeting through ancestry and soul contracts. Chapter 8, okay. So a person might choose to do something like this because they are a Satanist, they are a cult member, they are somehow involved in the dark forces, they are an occult practitioner who is misusing their power. So they're using their power in not so great ways. They might be making a deal with the devil, so to speak, either literally or metaphorically, or they might be tricked. So the family member who's promising the children, or the other family members to the dark forces might be tricked into doing so or scared into doing it. And we're going to talk about some of those specifics in just a moment. Okay, allergies. We've got some really interesting comments that I'm going to go back and read. But before I forget, I'm going to make some really quick announcements. So bear with me while I do that. For those of you who are new or who would like to learn more and access more than just this class, you can find out more about me and what I offer on my website, psychicprotectionsanctuary.com. There's also a YouTube channel called Psychic Protection Sanctuary. There's a free Facebook group called Psychic Protection Sanctuary. And there's also, if you go to my website, Psychic Protection Sanctuary, in the menu, there's an option that says Work with Maya. And there are a lot of different options from free to really low cost, all the way up to my signature program, which is not low cost. So there's literally help for everyone. And I have arranged it that way on purpose because I believe that everyone who needs help should be able to get some kind of help. So go ahead and check that out. I also have a 12-month academy for people who need and who are looking for a lot of support for working through these issues. Okay, back to our class. Let's go ahead and read some of these comments. All right, chat. Hey, you're welcome, Catherine. Let me go back. Laura is asking, is the mob considered a cult? You know, that is a really good question. So I think that there is a fine line between, and there's maybe not even a line between the purely spiritual, let's say someone is in a Satanist cult, satanic cult, versus being in the mob where, like, I think what I see as a clairvoyant is that dark forces are running that cult. I mean, running that mob, running the gang, running the mob, whatever, you know, where people are, where there's crime, there's murder, there's all sorts of, you know, there's drug running, there's all sorts of things happening. And in those kinds of environments, of course, there are people who think they're making the decisions. And on some level they are, but really behind the scenes, there are dark spiritual entities that are nudging all of that and running the show. So I would say yes, based on what I've seen. And Kathy is, oops, where are we going? Kathy is asking, how does this bypass someone's free will? I actually had that in my notes. What about free will? So this is a tricky thing. And it's a very common question. There is a current, very prevalent, popular belief, spiritual belief. And that belief is that no one and nothing can impose against your free will. And that if something happens to you, it's because you chose it. I don't agree with that. And I've talked to people where they use logic, and I say, well, what about, you know, all the starving children? Have they, or people who've been the victim of genocide, or you know, just all sorts of horrible things that happen on this planet. Did they want that to happen to them? And there's this kind of circular thinking of like, well, on some level they chose it. And I don't agree with that. I mean, maybe sometimes that's true, that Sometimes people might have a soul contract. They decided that this is how they're going to exit this lifetime, is in this way, through this like natural disaster or whatever. But I think a lot of times there are lots of things that happen in this reality that people have not agreed to. I mean, think about if someone's walking down the street and they get mugged and beaten up. They're not going to say that they agreed to that. Okay. So it's like this very popular belief, but it doesn't actually match up with the reality that's in front of us. So I just invite everyone to re-question the whole idea that, I mean, yes, we do have free will. We get to choose if we're going to do something or not do something. But this whole idea that other beings and people, humans and other beings, are not allowed to impose upon our free will, it's a tough one because it's very comforting to believe that. And I think that's why it's such a popular belief. But it's actually one of the beliefs that I debunk in my book. I talk about a whole bunch of different spiritual myths that trip people up and make them vulnerable because they think that these things can't happen to them. So, so for example, I know I was promised to the dark forces before I was born. I've worked with other clients who've had this happen. Did I choose that? Did my baby self choose that? Or did my soul choose that? I absolutely believe I did not choose that. That was not something that I agreed to. And I would say that, most of the clients that I've worked with, they did not agree to it either. So, so that's my little ramble about free will. And, but one thing to keep in mind is when it comes to children, as far as free will, the parent or the caretaker tends to have authority over the child. So this is one reason why it's easy for this kind of thing to happen, because the parent or the caretaker has authority. Okay. Catherine says, I got it, and I keep trying to get back to read, but so exhausted from all the stuff going on in my life. Okay. So, yes. Kathy is asking, isn't that an egregore? So a thought form entity? Clarify for me which part you are referring to as an egregore, and then I can answer your question. Okay. Catherine says, I don't believe we have free will and never did. Yeah, and in no way does our reality match up. Yeah, I agree with you. I tend to be kind of a moderate in a lot of my views because of how my brain works. So I do think that we have free will. This is my thought process here. I think that we do have free will to make the decisions, but like, for example, I made various decisions in how I was going to run my day today, but there are other aspects that I really didn't have a choice over. I won't go into all the details, but you can like take that concept and think about your own day and your own life. Like, you are making decisions, but there are other ways that you are experiencing limitations that you don't prefer to have. And so you kind of have free will, but you kind of don't totally have free will. Yeah. Oh, Kathy is saying the mob mentality. Yeah, I mean, I personally wouldn't define that as an egregore, because an egregore is an actual entity that is created from a group mentality. So maybe they are creating entities. Yes, but I'm not sure that that totally applies to. I think she was asking if the mob would be considered a cult, like a group that's doing bad things and definitely working with negative energy. And there is peer pressure and there's a lot of darkness running through it. Absolutely, yes. Okay. Saleev says, is it possible that I have some kind of contract with dark forces since I was a child? Yeah, okay. So those are some good questions to be asking yourself. And just clarifying for the benefit of everybody, these are actually questions that I answer for people in my paid academy. I answer questions like that all the time, but not in the free group. But you can certainly take what you posted there, your question, and you can make it into a post in the free group and kind of get feedback from some of the other members in the free Facebook group. You're asking, is it possible that I have some kind of contract with the dark forces since I was a child? Because I feel that it is my dharma to beat big pharma after dealing with chronic illness from a very young age. Have been, yeah. So I will say this, that sometimes if someone has a big soul mission, which you very well might, Saleev, a big soul mission in this current time and space on the planet. For those who have a really big mission, sometimes they are negatively, for negative purposes, placed with a family that is run by dark forces in order to keep that person from reaching their full mission. Yeah. And that was the case in my family, and I'm sure many people who are watching this. Okay, so that's some pretty good food for thought, Saleev. Thank you for bringing that up. Catherine says, I'm an independent thinker and I don't see things like most are taught. I'm so thrilled to come across you, Maya, because I resonate with your thinking. So grateful. I'm so glad too. I call myself a, I just blanked out on what I call myself. I call myself a, oh my gosh, sometimes if I get a drink of water, the brain freeze goes away. That's so funny. I've had that happen a couple of times today. And it could be these allergies that are driving me crazy and giving me brain fog. Okay, I just thought of the phrase. I don't know why I couldn't think of it because I use it all the time. I call myself an open-minded skeptic. Open-minded skeptic. So very open. I question everything, all the ideas, all the popular beliefs, all of it. So, all right. So I'm going to go back to my notes now, and then I'll check comments. I'll check the chat again in a little bit. So we had a lot of really great comments. I'm loving this. Thank you for participating. This actually, I think it really makes this class even better than just me talking at you. It's great to have a discussion and to spend time together. All right, so let me take a look at my notes here. So just to recap, after I read from the book, I was talking about a few different possibilities of why a person might promise a child or a family member to the dark forces. It might be because they are an active member of a cult, or the person is a Satanist, but there are many other dark organizations, not just Satanism. So in fact, we brought up I think it was Laura who asked about the mob. I mean, there's all sorts of religious and spiritual groups that are really run by dark forces, as well as other groups that we might not think of as spiritual that are really run by dark forces. The person who's promising the child might be making a deal with the devil, which what I mean by that is they are wanting to obtain favors. So if they promise the child to whatever force they're promising it to, then they're hoping for, you know, whatever, you name it, success, riches, relationships, like whatever it is that they think, fame, all the things that they think that they want. And it's not just that. Let me point out, it's not just like fame and money and all of that. It can also be making a deal with the dark forces for some other reason. And I'll give you an example. So my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, there was some really dark stuff that was happening in the family when I was conceived. And I'm not going to sidebar too much and go all into that story, but there was some very disturbing stuff going on, and it was really jarring to the family. And it was really obvious that there was something very troubling spiritually going on in the family that was especially impacting one of my grandmother's sons, who was taken over by this dark presence. And so when I was conceived out of wedlock, I was conceived out of wedlock. And in that era, 50 years ago, that's bad, you know, like that's just shameful. And so we need to like remove that like embarrassment from the family. So I was put up for adoption, but in that process, my grandmother was hoping to send that really terrifying darkness that was terrifying and taking over the family. She was hoping to send that into me to divert it from what she considered to be her family. I wasn't considered part of the family. So then I'll swing back around and talk about how that affected me in just a little bit. But that's another way of making a deal. It's not just making a deal for riches, but like she was making a deal for the safety of her family. And somebody asked me one time, well, was she a Satanist? And I said, no, she was a good Catholic lady. Like she was very religious and like went to church all the time. So she absolutely was not a Satanist. I don't agree with her choice, but I see how she made the decision thinking that she was protecting, quote, her family. So that's another way of making a deal. And then they can also be tricked or scared into it, which I think also ties in with my story as well. Okay, so what does this mean? Like when a child is promised to the dark forces, what does this mean? Like what happens to the child? What does this mean for the child? So there are various possibilities of how it can impact the child. And I think it really depends on the deal. There are some scenarios, and I'm going to go through this list. You might want to take notes on this. Let's see, I've got 4 different scenarios of what this can look like for the child's life. Number 1, if the child is promised to the dark forces, this can equate to the fact that permission is given by the parent or the caretakers. Permission is given for the child throughout their whole life, so into adulthood, not just childhood, for the child to be attacked spiritually, to have a life of torture, of suffering, even for them to be surveilled, in other words, watched by dark forces. And it's permission for them to be harassed spiritually their entire life. Now, spiritual harassment can also show up as, it can look like problems in your life, like people, dark people constantly being sent into your life. So it's not just entity attacks. It could be, but it can also be all sorts of blocks to your ability to manifest your needs, to be able to manifest a support system. It's just this harassment and interference by dark forces in general. So permission to be attacked, tortured, surveilled, harassed their entire life. So in this scenario, this involves just that lifetime. I'll talk about another scenario where it involves the child's soul for like all eternity. So this first category that I'm describing right here, where permission is given for the child to be attacked, harassed, surveilled, tortured, that is the category that I fell into. So just giving a frame of reference. If you are suspecting that you might have been promised to the dark forces, you might be able to relate to one of the scenarios on this list. Number 2 scenario is the expectation that the child at whatever age is supposed to join the cult or the dark forces or whatever element of the dark forces. So either an expectation or an outright requirement. This child, when they reach a certain age, whether it's during childhood, adolescence, adulthood, they are required to join the cult or to join whatever this element of the dark forces is, to join the group. Thankfully, I don't fit into that category. The third scenario is even more troubling, and this is that permission is given. So the caretaker gives permission for spirit attachment or full possession of the child. So the child is a vessel for, he or she becomes a vessel of one or more entities, whether it's demonic or other kinds of beings. And I've worked with clients who have had relatives, who've had loved ones who have been in this category. And then the fourth scenario is when the child is promised to the dark forces, the dark forces then gain authority over the child's soul through lifetimes. And that's, of course, the most severe because it's not just this lifetime of troubles, but it is lifetime after lifetime. Most of the clients that I've worked with who have been in this category, it's not their first lifetime on this rodeo. They've been going through this for lifetimes, and now they're finally figuring out why they're experiencing so much horrific kinds of things in their life. It's because there has been, it wasn't just, quote, just an ancestral curse. It was that they, or maybe their other siblings in a past generation, were promised to a satanic cult, for example, and now lifetimes later or generations down the family line, they are having major issues because it's like this log jam of horrible, spiky, sharp energy that they're dealing with. Okay, so let's go and read some comments. So those are the four possible scenarios. Of course, there are infinite things that can happen in our reality. These are 4 of the common scenarios that I've seen with the clients and students that I've worked with. It's allergy season here in Arizona. Okay, so one of the things that was brought up in our Facebook group was that just how mind-blowing it is that, like, how could a person even think about doing that to their child or to a child? Like, how could they even do that? It just blows our mind to think about, like, the kind of people that would do that. And of course, it's mind-blowing because you're not the kind of person that would ever do that. But we've got some pretty sick people, mentally sick people. Okay, Laura says, my father did it because he wanted money and power. Yeah. Laura, I just want to say I agree with your comments. I'm not going to read all of them because they're kind of going a little bit off our main topic, but actually we can have another class on all of that. I was literally thinking about the vampire cannibal thing earlier today. So we are in agreement. Yeah, Catherine says, oh yes, so many dark people through my life. Laura says, it's freaking exhausting. I feel I was kicked off course into my family. I never chose them. That's an important thing to bring up. And I do, just for those of you who are wanting to be studious with this and read the book, chapter 8, I do talk about soul contracts in the Psychic Attack Sourcebook, and about how the popular thinking right now, I'm going to roll my eyes right now. The popular thinking right now is that, you know, if there's anything bad happening, it's because you have a soul contract for it. And I do think that there actually are genuine, actual negative soul contracts that we've chosen. But I also think that all sorts of other hijacking can happen, like what you're talking about, Laura. I feel that I was, that not only myself, but I see a lot of other people as well, were kicked into the wrong family lineage that they were never supposed to be in. And there are a variety of reasons why that can happen. But across the board, it's usually to diminish that individual's soul path. So Catherine says, I feel like my spaceship dropped me off on the wrong planet. Catherine, that's so hilarious because I've always had this mental image in my head, not of a spaceship, but of like a cosmic bus. And I've always joked that, like, oh my God, I got off on the wrong bus stop. Like, this is got off on the wrong bus stop. Like, I got off on the wrong planet. This is totally all wrong here. It is so wrong here. It should not be like this here at all.
Thank you.
Catherine says, I'm stuck in
you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's fun to laugh about it, but it does suck. I'm going to read your other comment. I'm stuck in a hell city that is so hot and mosquito bites all over right now. That's my allergy. Yeah. Oh, so thanks for coming on and speaking up. And that actually reminded me that I was going to open this up for anybody who wants to just share or comment. We've got about 5 or 10 minutes where we could do that. But we actually have a really good question first. So go ahead and raise your hand if you think that you want to share. And then I also have a little bit of teaching on what can be done for the child or the adult child. So Z-Bell is asking, what about satanic ritual abuse? Absolutely. So that fits in where if a child is the victim of satanic ritual abuse, I guarantee that they have been promised, quote, promised to the dark forces. Those ritualistic abusive behaviors are actually intended, they are rituals intended to create suffering for the child in order to call upon the dark forces. And sometimes the ritual abuse is intended to call entities into the child, but not always. Every scenario is different. But that fits in absolutely. So raise your hand if you think that you want to share. Does anybody want to? And it's totally optional. I have a little more teaching. I wanted to give the opportunity. Yeah, so Zebel, were you saying that you wanted to come on and talk? Yes, absolutely. Do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself? Hi, where are you joining from?
Hi, yes, I'm joining from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Great to meet you. Feel free to share.
Yes, thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I'm so grateful for you, Miss Maya, letting us have a free group where we can feel safe and not as oppressed people to know that we are not alone. Thank you so much. My thing is I'm dealing with a lot of EMF and 5G torture that comes with being a targeted individual because I'm a whistleblower against, corruption. And, I've also been a victim of satanic ritual abuse because my family are Freemasons and they promised my life insurance policy to, my Freemasonic family in order for me to continuously be under a terrible microscope and, severe radiation poisoning. Yeah. And I just don't know, like, I've called a lot of psychics and healers and they've gotten bribed by these same Satanists to not help me. And so they go against the moral code of when I pay them to help me, instead they take that money from the other side and, sell me out every time. And I just don't know what to do because, I've been so afraid that all of my money is gone and I'm still being tortured, not being able to sleep. And I want to be able to feel safe because the more I speak up on Facebook, it seems the more they try to, keep me in a cell of, you can only speak so much because, we're going to keep shadow banning you. We're going to keep making sure you don't sleep. We're going to keep you isolated. They've totally taken me to the mental ward countless times. And I haven't been able to get a job. I'm on disability. Because these people have, they tried to take me to court and falsified evidence against me. Even when I won in court, these people would not pursue the person that the Satanists paid to, create false allegations against me. They would not pursue her for the constitutional injustice she caused me. And so, I'm just so amazed because I even had to show a patent number for mind control to one of my psychiatrists in order to get her to stop discrediting me, because she did not believe that there are malicious and nefarious scientists, and all of these people that play a part in keeping a lot of whistleblowers from revealing the truth about, these underworld type of activities.
Absolutely. And just know that you are not alone. There are a lot, I mean, it's unfortunate that this is happening to anyone, but you are not alone. And also, unfortunately, there are a lot of, quote, light workers, psychics, etc., who are easily brought over to the dark forces. They're easily bought, like the experience that you had. It's really unfortunate. I want to redirect, though, and ask you, since today's topic is on can a child be promised to the dark forces? Did you have anything that you wanted to say about that, ask about that, or add to that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. I really wanted to ask, because I'm a victim of satanic ritual abuse, is it going to be wrong for me to ever conceive? Because, I am terrified to bring a child into this world, even at 31 years old. Will I get bad karma for having a child and bringing them into this program? Because, you know, to ask a child to go through a lot of radiation and isolation is, to me, unjust. But I just, you know, I want someone to love and carry my legacy on. Is it better for me to adopt, or, you know, I just don't know what to do, because to bring a child into a situation like this, to me, is like almost, you know, is it ruthless for me to do this? I really want someone to love and have in my life, but ma'am, this is I don't know if this is a good situation for a child.
Yeah, that's tough. I don't think that there's a one size fits all answer
Yes,
to that.
right.
I think it really is up to the individual. I don't remember what word that you used, but I don't,
Nefarious.
well, there was something about feeling like you would be doing something bad by bringing,
Yes,
I can't
ruthless.
remember what,
Yes, ruthless,
ruthless,
because it's
right,
heartless to
ruthless,
right.
right. Well, there's a lot of different ways to look at this, because you could be thinking of it as bringing forth the next generation of warriors and
Mm,
truth speakers, and you're
mm,
bringing forth the next generation of these whistleblowers. But
mm.
yes, it is not going to be easy for them to um, be born into that lineage that you're currently
Yes,
dealing with, but
yes,
also kind of stepping back and broadening it. There are people who have children who have other problems in their lineage. There's addiction or alcoholism or mental illness or other things going through their lineage, and they still have children, because
right.
there's this hope and promise, this hopefulness of passing down a legacy of love. And when we are birthing our new lineage, you know, we're of course hoping to heal those problems, those issues in our lineage, not to
Mm,
pass them on. So, you know, it's possible that by having a child or children, you, as the warrior that you are, can be working as the matriarch of the family to bring healing to the future generations.
wow, transmuting.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So there's a lot of ways to look at it. I just feel like there's definitely an empowered way of looking at this and bringing forth healing for your future generations. And I wish you
Whoa,
so much strength and protection. And thank you for being here. And
thank you.
I'm so glad that you shared what you did today.
Thank you so much, Miss Maya. You're amazing.
As are you, my dear. I'm going to read some of these comments. Oh, allergies. Okay. All right. Keeping it on here with comments. Yeah, Laura says, personally, I can't imagine bringing a child into this. Yeah, it's tough. I can see both sides to it. I personally wasn't able to have children, and I chose not to adopt. But I could see how I I can just see how much healing can be brought into the planet through birthing a new lineage. I just see that potential. But as we all know, as many of us know, like living in this reality sucks in a lot of ways. There's also beauty here. So it's really going to be up to each individual to make that decision. So Catherine says, I wanted to be a mother, but would not bring a child to this world. No way. Mary Ellen says, Z may like to look at the books by Michael Fitzhugh Bell. Interesting that they share a surname. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Okay, so just a couple of brief tips as we prepare to wrap it up. But I wanted to say, if anyone else wanted to share verbally, even though we don't have time for that, if you want to share through the comments, now would be a good time to be typing that in, and I'll read that once I go through this next segment. Okay. All right. So obviously, for time's sake, we can't, like, this is not going to be sufficient for addressing this entire issue, obviously. But here are a couple of short ideas on what can be done for the child or the adult child. So if the person in question that we're talking about is still a child, or if they are now grown up, if it's you or someone else that you know, what can be done for them? Or are they just like, is it a hopeless cause? I don't believe that it's a hopeless cause. That could be because I am stubborn in a good way. I believe that there are things that can be done, and I'm persistent. So I have 3 things listed here in my notes. What can be done for the child or the adult child who has been promised to the dark forces? Number 1, revocation of past contracts. So revoking, erasing, rewriting, disavowing any of those past contracts in which the child was promised to the dark forces. And there are a lot of ways that contracts can be rewritten. That kind of goes beyond the scope of our free class tonight. We go into a lot of that in my paid academy, but you can take this and brainstorm with it. Okay. Number 2 of what can be done for the child or adult child. Lots and lots of prayer, spiritual cleansings, and if appropriate, maybe even exorcisms. Exorcisms would be appropriate if the child was given over for full or partial possession, especially full possession. So, which is pretty obvious. I mean, the child's behavior is going to be very, very demonic. So that's when exorcisms would possibly be utilized. But just simple prayer is powerful, no matter what spiritual or religious tradition you might happen to be aligned with. I am a huge believer in prayer, whether it's specific verses of prayers or whether it's speaking from your heart and soul, making declarations, proclamations, speaking what it is that you wish to bring into reality, speaking aloud of what healing you wish to occur for this child or the adult child, and speaking the prayers out loud. I don't know exactly why this is. I don't have proof as to why this is, but speaking the prayers out loud is so much more powerful than if you're just thinking them. And it could be as simple as it is bringing those words forth into the matrix program in a much more solidified way. But speaking the prayers out loud, spiritual cleansings can be, whether you are the adult child and you're doing a lot of smoke cleansing, sage, frankincense, dragon's blood, copal, salt baths, anointing yourself with essential oils, frankincense oils, any kind of spending time in nature, allowing nature to cleanse you, or doing any of that for the child or the adult child, and even going to trusted, because as we mentioned with Zebel's story, not all healers are trustworthy, and not all of them know how to deal with this kind of thing. But if you have contact, if you have found trustworthy spiritual healers, you can work with them to assist with spiritual cleansing for yourself or the child. Okay, so number 1 is revoking of past contracts. Number 2 is lots of prayer, spiritual cleansing, exorcisms, if that extreme measure is needed. Number 3 is that this, like a lot of spiritual problems, tends to be a step-by-step process. And those of you who've gone through my academy have seen this in action, that rarely, although there's always space for miraculous, instantaneous healing, but rarely do we see in the realm of dark forces activity, rarely do we see someone with one healing session be completely healed of all of their issues with being promised to the dark forces or whatever their particular issue is. Rarely do we see like 100% permanent healing forever and ever and ever from like a 1-hour session. Usually it is a step-by-step process. So whether the person is doing their own healing work every day or they're working with a healer or in a program, it is a step-by-step process. So every day going deeper, more healing, different things will come up to be healed. Just remember, it's not a McDonald's drive-through. It is a step-by-step process. It's a step-by-step process. So number 1, revoking of past contracts. Number 2, tons of prayer, spiritual cleansings, exorcisms if needed. Number 3, it's a step-by-step process. Okay, so we had a couple more comments. And my comments are getting all acting weird. Okay, so Mary Ellen says, in regard to the author Michael Fitzu-Bell, this author has been through a similar situation and offers supportive websites in the back of the books. Thank you for introducing us to that new author, Mary Ellen. Laura says, who do you go to for an exorcism? So yeah, I'll answer that. I personally don't go for exorcisms, but I don't think you were asking like me. People would usually go for exorcisms through the Catholic Church. That's what would be considered an exorcism. Depending on where you live, the Catholic Church will be more or less open to helping you with that. Some priests are more open to that, some are less so. And then within Christian traditions, there is something similar. It's not called exorcism, but it's called deliverance ministries. So this would be, it's basically a similar process, different process, but the same goal is to release the demonic or dark presence. And then I'm certain that in other religious traditions, they have aspects of deliverance as well. But for what would be called exorcism, that would usually be through the Catholic Church. But as I say that, I think that there are shamans who would say that what they do, some of them would say that they do exorcism. Now, I am fully in support of shamanic practitioners. I want to say, remember that there are all different levels, and I don't need to say this to you guys. I can tell you all are you already know what's what. So this is for like whoever's watching the replay. Don't assume that because someone says that they're a shaman, that they know anything about releasing dark entities. I know a lot of shamans who went to a weekend workshop and to become a shaman. And I think it's very admirable, their desire to help in that way. But so what I'm saying is there are experienced shamans of different traditions that can absolutely do exorcisms. So it's not just a Catholic thing. But my little sidebar is that just because someone says they're a shaman does not mean that they know anything about exorcism. So you'll have to ask questions. All right. I need to get a drink. I wish I had a list of who are the good shamans, because there are, I just have to believe there are many good ones out there. Because of my work, I end up receiving clients and students who have worked with very bad shamans. And that's why they're finding me. I have worked with a lot of people who have gone to shamans who actually ended up doing black magic on them. So that's a little tricky. Okay. Oh, my comments just got all messed up. Catherine says, I was thinking about calling a Catholic church out of desperation to do an exorcism toward my demon neighbors above my apartment. Yeah, I mean, you could certainly check. Don't be surprised if they're not open to it. Because, like I said, different priests, like some priests don't even believe in this stuff, and some do. My guess is you might do best asking the priest to come out and do a blessing, a blessing on your home. Because I don't think that they would like do an exorcism against your neighbors, because that would be against free will. I know we talked about free will earlier, but like if we do impose upon people's free will and we're trying to exercise them, you probably weren't even talking about that, but just if we're trying to exercise them, then we're going against their free will. But you can do all sorts of things to have the priest bless your home. And I think they're very open to doing house blessings, even if they are not into the exorcism thing. So Laura says, can I talk about the consistency issue? You mean being consistent with daily clearing? Is that what you mean by consistency? If so, I'm on my soapbox preaching that all the time too. It's definitely not a one-time thing. It's like brushing your teeth. You don't brush your teeth once and then you're surprised that you've got cavities a year later. It's like you got to brush those teeth every day. Mary Ellen says, I have had a Catholic priest visit my apartment for dark arts practices by a neighbor that was severely affecting me. He told me that unless he could access that space or those persons, he could only bless my apartment. Yeah, so that was what I was guessing as well. I feel like everybody here is quite advanced, so all the stuff that I'm talking about is, just for everyone's benefit who's watching the replay, because you guys all know all this already. Yeah, Laura is saying the consistency, step by step. Absolutely. Yeah. So Kathy is saying shamans can do entity removal. And I will say some shamans can do entity removal. I have encountered shamans who are calling themselves shamans because they took a weekend workshop. And they have no idea how to safely remove an entity. So this is just a warning for everybody watching this, that just because someone has like a spiritual title, don't assume anything good or bad. Like, definitely ask questions. A true shaman, which is what I think you're talking about, Kathy, a true shaman who has had not just a workshop, but who has worked with indigenous practices and has spent years learning their craft, they can probably help you with entity removal. Yeah. Z-Bell says, this is wonderful, much appreciated. And Laura says, there can be a backlash after a removal too. Yes, thank you for bringing up this really important point. Everybody, whether it's the issue of a child being promised to the dark forces, which was today's topic, or clearing out any kind of negative interference, like what Z-Bell was talking about, as she's been trying to navigate her situation. She's been getting blasted even more. Those dealing with paranormal kinds of things. When we engage in trying to clear, either speak up about, speak against, push against, clear out these issues, whether they're spiritual, paranormal, or other, there does tend to be some pushback. And it depends on the situation, but most times when people are experiencing that backlash, it is because what they're doing is working. The clearing that they're doing is working. And that is why the entities or the forces are pushing back, because they want you to stop. They want to freak you out and go, oh my God, the attack is ramping up. I better stop what I'm doing. And that's what the dark forces, the entities, whatever, they want you to stop. And so the people that I have helped to clear spiritual warfare, it's like this bell graph. It's like this image of this bell graph is that we start hitting the clearing really hard. And at least for half of the people, not everyone, but a lot of the people, there's an uptick. Like the attacks sometimes get worse. And then the person has to really be a warrior and keep pushing through it and pushing through it. Because a lot of that is like, it's psychological warfare. It's to get the person to back down. So they keep going. And then the attacks finally diminish. And then eventually the person is completely free of all attacks. And it's, I think, one of the hardest things a person has to experience. I think it's one of the hardest things that a person can experience in their life is having to go through that kind of warfare, because they have to push through it, even though like the storm is coming harder, and the only way is through. So absolutely. Okay, I think we had one more comment, and then I'm gonna run because I've got a group energy clearing that I do every night. And Kathy says, kind of like detox flu. Yeah, there is some of that can happen as well. So go ahead and share with me, you guys, in the comments, what was your biggest takeaway from today's class? And I'll go ahead and read those before we close out for tonight. What was your biggest takeaway? And if you're watching this replay somewhere else, go ahead and share also what was your biggest takeaway. And as I'm waiting for your comments to come through, just a couple of quick reminder announcements that we have this free class. Right now it's on Zoom. We have a free class in our free Facebook group, Psychic Protection Sanctuary, every month. And it's always, at least right now, it's on the first Tuesday at 5:30 Pacific. Adjust for your time zone. So mark your calendar, 5:30 Pacific. And then if you want to work with me more deeply, you can find information on my website. So go ahead and share. What was your biggest takeaway? Website is psychicprotectionsanctuary.com. What was your biggest takeaway? And then also referring back, if you are the studious type, Psychic Attack Sourcebook on Amazon. Chapter 8 is where we talk about some of the lineage kinds of issues. Okay, Catherine is saying, the psychic attack causing extreme sleep deprivation is making it hard to get a quick answer to your question, LOL. And Kathy says, I enjoyed it all. Well, thank you all for being here. I truly appreciate each one of you. It's always been really important to me to offer free things to the community, and I will continue to do so for the time being, for the foreseeable future. In the free content that I create, the free content is always about the like the why and the what. Like, why is this happening? What is this? What is this particular element of spiritual warfare? What's this all about? And so the free content is always about the what. What is this all about? What is this kind of spiritual warfare? And then my paid academy is all about how to solve it. How do you actually resolve this kind of issue or other spiritual issues? We've got a couple of other comments. And Laura says, what you can do for a child or adult who's been put into the dark forces path. Mary Ellen says, thank you, Maya. That's my alarm that I need to go to my group energy clearing in a couple of minutes. Catherine says, thank you. My takeaway is to call a church for a blessing instead of an exorcism. Yeah, I think that's a good start, because you never know what kind of priest you're gonna be working with, and then you can get a feel for whether they would be open to the heavy duty stuff or not, because not all of them are. Jamie says, great topic, big thank you, and big you're welcome, and thank you in return. Laura says, thank you, Maya, and everyone for being here. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the Facebook group, Psychic Protection Sanctuary Facebook group. We have daily discussions in there, and I will see you at the next class. Thanks so much,
Thank you, Maya.
everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a beautiful evening, everybody.
Thank you.